Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. The story begins with the alien diplomat, Galactic of the Kyler race, descending onto Earth for a delicate diplomatic mission. The Kyler are a proud, advanced species with a strong sense of superiority, viewing humanity as backward and volatile. Galactic has been sent to establish trade negotiations and assess Earth's viability as a partner. Arriving in the bustling yet orderly city of Geneva, Galactic is immediately confronted with humanity's odd mix of technological ingenuity and cultural eccentricities. His initial impressions are dismissive, seeing humans as primitive despite their accomplishments. However, a peculiar human representative named Clara greets him with an uncharacteristic warmth, unsettling his expectations. Galactic's first encounter with Earth's hospitality occurs during an elaborate welcome dinner. Accustomed to sterile, efficient social interactions, he is baffled by the human focus on food, camaraderie, and informal conversation. He observes a spectrum of behaviors, from loud laughter to subtle emotional cues, that make him question his understanding of intelligent communication. Clara's efforts to make him feel at ease leave him confused but intrigued, especially when she insists on personally guiding him through Earth customs. During negotiations, Galactic is startled when the humans propose a deal that prioritizes mutual benefit rather than maximizing their gain. This starkly contrasts with Kyler negotiation tactics, which are cutthroat. When Clara gives him a handcrafted item symbolizing trust and partnership, Galactic is deeply confused. The Kyler have no equivalent of selfless generosity. This moment becomes a turning point as Galactic begins to view humanity in a new light. Galactic uncovers evidence of a hidden agenda within his mission. His government intends to exploit Earth's resources rather than pursue true diplomacy. Torn between loyalty to his people and a budding admiration for humans, he struggles with the moral dilemma. Meanwhile, Clara notices his growing discomfort and attempts to draw him out, further deepening their connection. Clara takes Galactic on a tour of Earth's diverse cultures, landscapes, and technological marvels. A particularly moving encounter with a humanitarian effort, humans working to aid both their own kind and the environment, leaves Galactic speechless. For the first time, he considers that humanity's flaws are balanced by a remarkable capacity for compassion and resilience. Galactic confronts his superiors via a secure communication link, questioning their intent. This act of defiance places him in danger, as the Kyler government threatens to terminate his mission and brand him a traitor. Clara, sensing the tension, offers her unwavering support. Together, they devise a plan to present a case for genuine partnership that would benefit both species, risking everything to defy the Kyler's manipulative plans. The climax sees Galactic delivering a powerful speech to a combined human and Kyler assembly, advocating for unity and trust. His heartfelt words, influenced by human values, resonate with both sides. The Kyler government reluctantly agrees to reconsider its approach, swayed by Galactic's courage. As Galactic departs Earth, he reflects on how humanity's hospitality and resilience have not only challenged his prejudices but also reshaped his worldview. Galactic of the Kyler disembarked from his shuttle with the precision and poise expected of an intergalactic diplomat. His elongated figure, sheathed in a shimmering carapace of metallic gray, towered over the human reception committee waiting on the landing pad. The air smelled alien, humid and rich with organic complexity, causing the delicate olfactory sensors in his crest to quiver. Ambassador Galactic, a human woman, stepped forward, her hand outstretched in the peculiar Earth greeting they called a handshake. "I'm Clara Anderson, your liaison for this mission. On behalf of the United Earth Council, welcome to Geneva." Galactic regarded the hand with faint disdain but performed the gesture. Humans insisted on unnecessary tactile contact, a habit the Kyler found unsettling. "The honor is mine, Representative Anderson," he replied, his voice a sonorous hum. "Though I confess, my initial assessment of your planetary conditions leaves much to be desired. The humidity is overwhelming." Clara's smile didn't falter. "We're just lucky it isn't raining. Shall we head inside?" As they moved toward the towering crystalline structure of the diplomatic hub, Galactic noted the contradictions around him. Humans walked with evident purpose yet lingered in parks, engaged in animated conversations or inexplicable laughter. Vehicles zipped through the streets with a blend of efficiency and chaos. It was as though humanity thrived in disorder, a notion that irked his Kyler sensibilities. Inside the conference hall, Clara's team presented Galactic with an itinerary: negotiations, cultural exchanges, and what they called a social dinner. The latter perplexed him. Why prioritize leisure during a critical mission? he asked Clara. She laughed softly. Dinner isn't just leisure, it's where connections are forged. You might find it enlightening. Kelthix doubted that. Yet, as he sat later amidst the humans' lively chatter, sampling their culinary creations, he found himself observing rather than judging. A child approached his table with wide, curious eyes, offering him a flower. Kelthix froze. Gifting, among the Kyler, implied submission or manipulation. Yet here the gesture seemed pure. Thank you, he managed, awkwardly accepting the flower. The child beamed and scampered off. Clara leaned closer. What did you think of your first human dinner? It was disconcerting, Kelthix admitted. Your kind exhibits an unanticipated depth of emotional complexity. I am uncertain how to process it. Clara's grin widened. Well, Ambassador, you're just getting started. To Kelthix's surprise, a flicker of anticipation stirred within him. Perhaps there was more to these humans than their chaotic exterior suggested. Kelthix walked into the conference chamber, his gait stiff with unease. The humans were already seated, their expressions ranging from curious to welcoming. Clara was among them, flashing him a small, encouraging smile. Despite his attempts to suppress it, he found her enthusiasm oddly reassuring, though he was careful not to show it. The room was a curious blend of human artistry and practicality. The polished wooden table at the center exuded a sense of permanence, while holographic displays floated above it, projecting statistics and data relevant to the day's negotiations. A faint scent of something sweet, likely a human air freshener, lingered in the air. Shall we begin? Clara asked, her voice cutting through his thoughts. Kelthix nodded, his luminous eyes narrowing slightly. Proceed. The discussion began with trade proposals. Human representatives presented plans for the exchange of technologies, resources, and cultural knowledge. The Kyler were known for their advancements in quantum energy systems, while humanity offered innovations in bioengineering and sustainable agriculture. As Kelthix analyzed the proposals, he noticed a peculiar theme. The humans seemed genuinely interested in mutual benefit. Their terms lacked the aggressive edge he was accustomed to in Kyler diplomacy. You propose we share our energy matrix designs, Kelthix said, his tone skeptical. In exchange, you offer advancements in genetic modification for ecological restoration. Is this not unbalanced in your favor? A man seated across the table, Dr. Harlan Reyes, leaned forward. Not at all, Ambassador. The technology we're offering has the potential to reverse ecosystem collapses, benefiting both our worlds. It's a fair trade, considering your energy systems would stabilize our interstellar logistics. Kelthix tilted his head, his crest pulsing faintly in thought. Among the Kyler, negotiations were ruthless, often leaving one party at a distinct disadvantage. Yet here the human's transparency seemed genuine. He glanced at Clara, who watched him with an open, almost disarming expression. Your terms are unexpectedly equitable, Kelthix said finally. It is uncommon for one species to prioritize shared progress over domination. Clara's smile deepened. Well, that's humanity for you. We've had a rocky history, but we've learned that cooperation gets us further than conflict. Before he could respond, a human attendant entered the room carrying a tray of beverages. Each cup was steaming, releasing an unfamiliar but pleasant aroma. This is a small tradition of ours, Clara explained, taking a cup and gesturing for Kelthix to do the same. Sharing a drink can symbolize goodwill and partnership. Kelthix hesitated, then reached for the smallest cup, his clawed fingers gingerly gripping the delicate handle. He took a cautious sip and was immediately overwhelmed by a burst of warmth and sweetness. The drink was rich, with subtle hints of spice. It is acceptable, he said after a pause. The humans chuckled softly, and Kelthix realized he'd inadvertently lightened the atmosphere. Later that evening, the social dinner Clara had promised turned out to be another layer of the human puzzle. Kelthix found himself seated at a long table laden with an array of colorful dishes. Humans engaged in animated conversations, their voices overlapping in what should have been chaos but somehow felt harmonious. Clara sat beside him, her plate filled with an eclectic mix of food. You've got to try this, she said, pointing to a bowl of golden-hued noodles. It's a classic Earth comfort dish. Kelthix reluctantly picked up a utensil, his movements mechanical. As he took a bite, the flavors exploded across his palate, a blend of savory, tangy, and mildly sweet. It was far removed from the nutrient paste he was accustomed to. You seem surprised, Clara observed, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Your species places an unusual emphasis on the sensory experience of sustenance, Kelthix replied. For the Kyler, nourishment is a functional necessity, not a recreational activity. Clara chuckled. Food is more than just fuel for us. It's culture, history, and connection. Sharing a meal brings people together. Before Kael'thix could respond, a small commotion drew his attention. A human child, no more than 5 years old, was weaving through the adults, clutching a tray of what appeared to be desserts. The child stopped in front of Kael'thix and offered him a delicate pastry. For you, the child said shyly, their cheeks flushed. Kael'thix froze, his crest stiffening. Among the Kyler, such a gesture would signify submission or an attempt to curry favor. He glanced at Clara, who was suppressing a smile. It's just kindness, she whispered. Kael'thix reached out and accepted the pastry, his claws careful not to damage it. Thank you, he said, his voice softer than usual. The child beamed and ran off, leaving Kael'thix with a strange warmth in his chest. Reflections. As the evening wound down, Kael'thix found himself alone on a balcony overlooking the city. The skyline glittered with human ingenuity, skyscrapers illuminated by sustainable energy sources, transport systems weaving through the streets like glowing arteries. Clara joined him, her presence quiet yet comforting. What are you thinking? She asked. Kael'thix hesitated before speaking. Your kind is perplexing. For a species as flawed as the Kyler perceive you to be, you possess remarkable qualities. Creativity, resilience, and a capacity for kindness that defies logic. Clara leaned against the railing, gazing at the horizon. We're not perfect, Ambassador. But imperfection doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's what makes us stronger. Kael'thix turned his gaze to the stars, his mind awhirl with questions. For the first time, he wondered if the Kyler's definition of strength might be incomplete. Perhaps, he murmured, there is more to your species than meets the eye. The negotiations resumed the following day with a measured intensity. Kael'thix was mentally prepared for another round of discussions, this time involving more technical aspects of the proposed trade agreements. The Kyler diplomat had spent the night reviewing the data and strategies, ready to assert dominance where necessary. Yet, as the meeting unfolded, the humans continued to behave in ways that confounded him. Clara introduced a proposal that addressed not only trade but also ecological restoration on Earth and the potential for shared efforts to rehabilitate planets affected by Kyler mining practices. We believe in the principle of interstellar stewardship, Clara explained, her tone earnest. We've seen what happens when short-term gains overshadow long-term sustainability. This partnership isn't just about trade, it's about building a better future together. Kael'thix studied her, searching for signs of duplicity. The Kyler, for all their advancements, had never placed much value on environmental preservation. Resources were consumed, and when a planet was no longer viable, it was abandoned. The notion of stewardship struck him as both naive and admirable. Your priorities are atypical, Kael'thix said carefully. Among my people, mutual benefit is often a guise for concealed ambition. Why should I trust that yours are different? Clara met his gaze steadily. Because trust is earned, not demanded. If you allow it, I'd like to show you what humanity can offer beyond numbers and contracts. Kael'thix hesitated, uncertain how to respond. The Kyler approach would be to assert dominance and demand concessions. Yet Clara's openness was disarming. Proceed, he said at last. The gift. After the session, Clara approached Kael'thix with a small rectangular box wrapped in an intricate pattern. The diplomat's crest stiffened as she handed it to him. This is for you, Clara said with a warm smile. Kael'thix eyed the object suspiciously. Explain the intent behind this offering. It's a gift, she said simply. A gesture of goodwill. Open it. Reluctantly, Kael'thix peeled back the wrapping to reveal a wooden case adorned with carvings of stars and planets. Inside was a delicate sculpture made of crystal and metal, depicting two figures, one human, one alien, standing side by side beneath an arch of interwoven branches. Kael'thix was silent for a long moment, his luminous eyes tracing every detail. Among the Kyler, such craftsmanship was reserved for ceremonial purposes or elaborate political ploys. Yet this gift carried no overt message of manipulation or subjugation. It was simply beautiful. You created this? He asked, his voice quieter than usual. Clara shook her head. Not me personally, but it was made by a group of human artisans. They designed it to represent unity and shared growth. Kael'thix's crest rippled with an unfamiliar sensation, something between curiosity and discomfort. Among my people, gifts often carry ulterior motives. How do I know this is not the same? Clara's smile faltered slightly, but her voice remained steady. Because sometimes a gift is just a way of saying, we value you. No strings attached. Galactic regarded her with a mixture of suspicion and intrigue. The Kyler concept of value was tied to utility and leverage, not sentiment. Yet here was Clara, offering something that defied his understanding. I will consider this gesture, he said finally, placing the sculpture back in its case. A crisis unfolds. Later that evening, as Galactic reviewed the day's proceedings in his private quarters, his secure communication device activated. The glowing insignia of the Kyler High Command appeared, followed by the stern visage of Commander Vuanel. Ambassador Galactic, the commander said, her voice cold and commanding. Report your progress. Galactic outlined the negotiations, carefully omitting the more personal aspects of his interactions with the humans. As he finished, Vuanel's expression darkened. Your focus on their terms is irrelevant, she snapped. The humans are a means to an end. Our interest lies in securing exclusive access to their resources, particularly their advancements in genetic engineering. Their culture and ideals are of no consequence. Galactic's crest stiffened in indignation. The humans have shown remarkable ingenuity and potential. Their approach to diplomacy is refreshing. Perhaps they could be valuable allies, not merely resources to exploit. Vuanel's eyes narrowed. You speak as though you've been compromised. Remember your purpose, Galactic. If the humans refuse to comply, we have contingencies in place to ensure their cooperation. The communication ended abruptly, leaving Galactic in a state of turmoil. The Kyler's intentions were clear, and they clashed violently with the growing respect he felt for humanity. For the first time in his career, he questioned whether loyalty to his people should override his own moral judgment. The reflection. Galactic found himself drawn to the sculpture Clara had given him. He studied its intricate details, noting how the two figures stood in perfect balance. It was a concept alien to the Kyler, who valued dominance above all else. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime at the door. Clara stood on the other side, holding 2 steaming cups. I thought you might need a break, she said, offering one to him. Galactic hesitated before accepting the cup. Your customs continue to perplex me, Representative Anderson. Clara chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. They stood in silence for a moment, the night sky stretching out beyond the glass windows. Finally, Galactic spoke. Your people have shown me a side of sentient life that I did not anticipate, he admitted. It is disconcerting. Clara tilted her head. Good disconcerting or bad disconcerting? I have yet to decide, Galactic said. But I find myself increasingly inclined to learn more. Clara raised her cup in a silent toast and Galactic mirrored the gesture. For the first time, he felt a flicker of something he could not name but suspected was the beginning of trust. Galactic sat in his quarters, his mind tangled in a web of uncertainty. The Kyler High Command's directives clashed violently with what he'd come to observe on Earth. Humanity was flawed, yes, but it was also filled with a spirit of resilience, creativity, and a strange, disarming kindness. Could he truly follow through with his orders, knowing what the humans stood to lose? The sculpture Clara had gifted him sat on a small pedestal, catching the ambient light in soft, refracted hues. It seemed to mock his indecision, a silent testament to humanity's sincerity. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Come in, Galactic called, his voice tinged with weariness. Clara entered, her ever-present warmth subdued by concern. I noticed you were quieter than usual during today's session. Everything okay? Galactic hesitated. Among the Kyler, showing vulnerability was a sign of weakness. Yet Clara's gaze was so open, so genuinely concerned, that he felt an inexplicable urge to confide in her. My people's approach to diplomacy differs greatly from yours, he said at last. Your transparency, while admirable, is unfamiliar. It leaves me questioning many things. Clara nodded, taking a seat across from him. Questioning isn't a bad thing, Ambassador. It means you're open to understanding something new. Galactic studied her, noting the earnestness in her expression. I have learned much during my time here, but not all of it has been comforting. Before Clara could respond, a small device embedded in Galactic's wrist emitted a series of sharp, urgent tones. His crest stiffened as he activated the interface. A holographic message from Commander Vuanel flickered into view. Ambassador Galactic, the commander's voice was as sharp as ever. Your reports have been noted, but your progress is deemed insufficient. We are activating Contingency Protocol Epsilon. You are to proceed with the secondary mission. Obtain the genetic data through any means necessary. Humanity's cooperation is no longer required. The message ended, leaving a cold silence in its wake. Clara, having overheard the exchange, stared at him in shock. "What does that mean?" she asked cautiously. Kael'thix hesitated, weighing the risks of honesty. "It means my people have abandoned diplomacy. They intend to take what they want by force." Clara's eyes widened, her expression shifting from disbelief to determination. "Then we need to stop them." A plan of defiance. Clara quickly led Kael'thix to a secure conference room, gathering a small team of trusted human officials. Despite her calm exterior, Kael'thix could see the tension in her movements. "We have two options," Clara began, addressing the group. "We can prepare for the worst-case scenario, defend ourselves if they attack, or we can prove to the Kyler that partnership is the better path. I vote for the second option." One of the officials, a grizzled man named Colonel Harris, crossed his arms. "You're asking us to trust an alien who just admitted his people plan to exploit us?" Kael'thix felt a surge of indignation but remained silent. Clara glanced at him, then back at Harris. "I trust him," she said firmly. "And if we want to avoid bloodshed, we need to show the Kyler that humanity isn't what they think we are." "What do you propose?" Harris asked, skepticism still evident. Clara turned to Kael'thix. "If we can show your people something undeniable, something that proves humanity's worth beyond what they see as exploitable resources, would they reconsider?" Kael'thix's crest rippled thoughtfully. "The High Command values strength and utility above all else. If humanity could demonstrate unparalleled ingenuity or unity, it might give them pause." "Then that's what we'll do," Clara said decisively. A journey of understanding. The next day, Clara and Kael'thix embarked on a whirlwind tour of Earth's most remarkable achievements. They visited the bustling spaceports of the Eurasian Federation, where humans were preparing to launch an ambitious terraforming project on Mars. Kael'thix was impressed by the ingenuity of the technology, though he masked it with his usual stoicism. In Africa, they observed a massive reforestation initiative, where humans were reversing centuries of ecological damage. Kael'thix marveled at the delicate balance of biology and engineering involved in the project. The final stop was a remote humanitarian outpost, where volunteers provided aid to those affected by a natural disaster. Clara led Kael'thix through the chaotic scene, introducing him to people of different cultures and backgrounds working together to rebuild homes and deliver supplies. One moment in particular stayed with Kael'thix, a young boy offering his last bottle of water to an elderly woman. The act was so selfless, so instinctively human, that Kael'thix found himself unable to look away. "This," Clara said softly as if sensing his thoughts, "is what makes us human. We're flawed but we care. Even when it's hard, even when it costs us." The dilemma deepens. That night, as Kael'thix reviewed the day's events, his wrist communicator pinged again. This time it wasn't Commander Vuarnel, but an automated message indicating a Kyler fleet had entered Earth's orbit. The invasion had begun. Kael'thix clenched his claws, his crest rippling with frustration. He knew what would happen next. Earth's defenses would be overwhelmed and humanity's survival would depend on their ability to adapt quickly. But Clara's words echoed in his mind, "We're flawed but we care." For the first time in his life, Kael'thix considered an unthinkable option, defying his orders. Could he truly betray his people to protect a species he barely understood? The sculpture on his desk seemed to glint in the dim light, a silent reminder of the unity he had begun to believe was possible. When Clara entered the room, her expression determined, Kael'thix made his decision. "I will help you," he said quietly. "But if we are to succeed, we must act quickly. The Kyler will not wait." Clara nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. "Then let's show them what humanity is capable of." The hum of the Kyler fleet outside Earth's atmosphere was a constant reminder of the looming threat. Kael'thix stood at the window, watching the distant lights of the ships orbiting the planet. Their presence was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The Kyler were notorious for their power, their fleets capable of wiping out entire civilizations in an instant. Yet, as he observed Clara and her team preparing, a sense of resolve began to take root within him. This wasn't just about the survival of Earth. It was about something far more profound, proving that the future of the galaxy need not be governed by domination alone. Clara entered the room, her face set in determination. "We have one shot at this," she said. "We've prepared a broadcast that will reach the Kyler fleet directly. It's not just a plea for peace. It's a demonstration of humanity's strength, of our will to survive." Kael'thix turned to face her, his expression somber. "And what will you ask for exactly?" "Not mercy," she replied, "but respect. We want the Kyler to see us as more than just a resource to exploit. We want them to understand that we, too, have something to offer, something they can't take. Kelthix's eyes narrowed. The Kyler don't understand compromise. They understand power. And that's exactly why this will work, Clara said with quiet confidence. If we can show them that humanity has the power to shape its own destiny, they might just think twice before destroying everything we've built. The broadcast. The team gathered in the underground bunker that had been set up as a command center. A massive communications array was ready to transmit the message across the Kyler fleet, sending it through the vast expanse of space to the ships currently hovering above Earth. Clara stood in front of the console, her fingers hovering over the keys. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Harris asked, his voice gruff. "We're risking everything and there's no guarantee they'll listen." "We have to try," Clara said, her voice unwavering. "Even if it doesn't work, we'll show them what humanity is capable of. And if we're going down, we'll go down fighting." Kelthix had been silent throughout the preparations, his mind focused on the implications of what they were about to do. He couldn't shake the thought that even if the Kyler fleet hesitated, it would only be a matter of time before they resumed their campaign. The humans were brave, but they were also naive. They had no idea what they were facing. The screen flickered to life and Clara began her message. "To the Kyler fleet," she began, her voice calm but firm, "we are humans of Earth. You stand on the precipice of something far greater than you can imagine. You seek to take what is ours, but what you fail to realize is that we will not yield. We are more than resources. We are a people and we will defend our home with everything we have." Kelthix watched the broadcast unfold, his stomach tightening. It was a bold declaration, but he could sense that Clara was holding something back, something that would come next. "We are not your enemies," Clara continued. "We've seen the destruction your kind can bring. But we also believe in something greater, something that transcends the fear and destruction you've spread across the galaxy. We believe in the power of unity, of cooperation. And we are willing to fight for that future. Not just for us, but for all who believe that peace is worth the sacrifice." She paused and Kelthix felt a shiver run through him. He understood now. This wasn't just a broadcast to save Earth. It was a challenge. A challenge to the very foundation of Kyler superiority. Clara's eyes flicked to Kelthix, her gaze softening. "I've learned from you, Ambassador. You've shown me that there's more to strength than just power. Humanity may not have the fleet you do, but we have something you don't." "And what is that?" Kelthix asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hope," Clara said, her eyes locked on his. "We have hope. And that's why we won't let you destroy us." The transmission ended and for a moment, there was a stunned silence. Then, as if to punctuate the gravity of the moment, an alarm blared, signaling that the Kyler fleet had received the message. The response. Kelthix's heart pounded in his chest as he turned to the monitor. The response was coming. His mind raced with the possibilities. Would they respond with brute force, or had humanity actually managed to reach them? The screen flickered again and an image of Commander Viwarnell appeared. The Kyler officer's face was stern, her eyes piercing. "Ambassador Kelthix," she said, her tone cold, "you've defied the High Command's orders. What is this foolishness?" "I did not come here to see humanity destroyed," Kelthix replied, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "You may call it foolish, but it's the truth. The humans are not as you believe them to be." Viwarnell's gaze darkened. "You are a traitor, Kelthix. If you continue down this path, you will be held accountable. As for humanity, they are insignificant. They will fall just as every other weak species has before them." "No," Kelthix said firmly. "I will not allow that." The screen went dark for a moment, then came back to life with an image of a distant Kyler vessel descending toward Earth. It wasn't the overwhelming force Kelthix had feared, but something else entirely, an emissary ship, smaller and less threatening. "I have orders from the High Command," Viwarnell's voice returned, "to initiate peace talks. But know this, Ambassador. If your human allies fail to demonstrate their worth, the negotiations will be short-lived." The message ended, leaving Kelthix with a feeling of disbelief. The Kyler fleet had not attacked. They had retreated. The aftermath. The room was filled with a quiet, stunned relief. Clara and her team stared at the monitor, trying to process what had just happened. "It worked," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're willing to talk." Kelthix nodded, though the weight of the situation was far from over. "This is only the beginning. The Kyler will test humanity. You must be prepared for the challenges ahead." "Then we'll be ready," Clara said, a fire igniting in her eyes. "We've already shown them what we're made of. And we'll keep showing them." Kelthix turned to face her, his expression softening. I never believed this would happen. But for the first time, I believe you may have a chance. Clara smiled. Thank you, Ambassador. I think this partnership is just beginning. Calethix wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time he felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that peace might be possible not just between humans and Kyler, but across the entire galaxy. The days that followed the Kyler fleet's retreat were a blur of activity. Earth's governments were on high alert, preparing for both the possibility of a peaceful resolution and the need for further defense should the Kyler return with more aggressive intentions. The unexpected diplomatic breakthrough had created a sense of cautious optimism, but no one was naive enough to believe the danger had passed. Calethix remained in Earth's command center, working closely with Clara and the other leaders. The Kyler had agreed to the peace talks, but the terms were vague and the specifics were still being negotiated. It was clear that the Kyler were not fully convinced of humanity's worth, and they would test that in the coming months. Clara sat across from Calethix, a map of Earth's major cities spread out before them, dotted with red markers indicating potential sites for further negotiations. She spoke with an urgency Calethix hadn't seen in her before. We need to be ready for every possible outcome, Clara said, tapping a marker with her finger. If we're going to get the Kyler to respect us, we have to show them that we're not just going to roll over. We need to prove that we're capable of more than survival. We need to show them that humanity can lead in a way that benefits both of us. Calethix, though still an outsider to humanity's ways, nodded. You speak of leadership, but the Kyler view strength in different terms. Their idea of leadership is forged through dominance. You must show them something beyond that, something they cannot ignore. Something they cannot ignore, Clara repeated, her eyes alight with an idea. Yes. We need to leverage our greatest asset, our unity. It's something they've never truly understood. Humanity has a history of coming together in the face of adversity. We've done it time and time again. If we can make the Kyler see that strength comes not from dividing but from uniting, they might finally understand our value. Calethix regarded Clara with growing respect. She had a vision that transcended mere diplomacy. She spoke of an ideological shift, something that would not only win a peace treaty but reshape the perception of humanity in the galactic sphere. But the road ahead was fraught with peril. The negotiations begin. The first of the peace talks took place on a neutral space station, orbiting a desolate moon in the outskirts of the system. The station was designed for interstellar diplomacy, a sterile yet functional platform for high-stakes meetings. Clara, Calethix, and a select team of Earth's representatives were aboard, along with several Kyler diplomats. Commander Viwarno, still cold and calculating, stood at the forefront of the Kyler delegation. Her eyes bore into Calethix as if daring him to betray his people. Clara stood confidently at the head of the human delegation, her gaze unwavering as she faced the Kyler. Her voice rang out with the clarity of someone who had fought for something more than just peace. We come here today not only to negotiate the future of Earth but to offer something more, a partnership. Not one of servitude or exploitation, but one built on mutual respect and shared growth, Clara began. Viornael's eyes narrowed. You speak of respect, Representative Anderson, but what guarantees do you offer? Humanity has no fleet to match ours. No power, no military strength. What makes you think we will treat you as equals? Her voice was venomous. Clara smiled slightly, undeterred. We are not asking to be treated as equals in military might. We ask only that you recognize our strength in another way. Our ability to unite, to overcome adversity, to build something that stands the test of time. Calethix watched, standing slightly apart, his eyes scanning the room. The tension was palpable. The Kyler had come to dominate, and the humans, despite their courageous stance, had little but words to defend themselves. Words, and the strength of the example they were beginning to set. We've seen what you do to those who resist you, Clara continued, but we're offering you something different. A partnership based not on fear, but on the promise of something greater for both of us. The resources of Earth, the potential of our technology, and the resilience of our people. These are what we offer. Viornael seemed unmoved, but Calethix could sense a flicker of doubt in her eyes. It wasn't much, but it was a crack in her unwavering certainty. He stepped forward, his voice calm but filled with purpose. Humanity has shown me something no other species has. The ability to adapt, to grow in ways the Kyler never could. Their vision of the universe is not defined by power alone, but by what they can create together. Viornael's eyes flashed with irritation. You've gone soft, Calethix. Your people, the Kyler, do not thrive on softness. You are betraying everything we stand for. Calethix stood his ground. Perhaps it is not softness you fear but something you have never known, compassion. cooperation, unity. The room fell into silence. The words hung in the air, heavy with significance. Clara met Calethix's gaze, her eyes filled with gratitude. She had expected resistance, but she had also expected to find allies in the most unlikely of places. The Kyler response. The peace talk stretched into the night, the two delegations at an impasse. There were moments of heated debate and sharp words, but Calethix noticed a shift. The Kyler diplomats were no longer speaking with the same confidence they had earlier. The idea of unity, of cooperation instead of domination, had unsettled them. It was a concept they had never had to consider before. As the meeting broke for the evening, Calethix found himself standing on the observation deck, looking out at the cold expanse of space. Clara joined him shortly after, her expression pensive. "I can't believe it's come this far," she said quietly. "They're not even trying to negotiate in the way I expected. It's like they don't know how to process us." "That's because you are not like other species they've encountered," Calethix said, his voice contemplative. "You offer them something they cannot take, something they must choose to accept." He turned to her. "And that is something they cannot understand." Clara let out a long breath. "Then how do we make them see? How do we show them that humanity is worth the risk of changing everything they've ever known?" Calethix stared into the vastness of space, the silence between them speaking volumes. "You continue as you have been. You show them who you are. Your strength, your unity. The rest will follow." The final decision. The next day the talks resumed. Viorenneel's demeanor had changed. She was more cautious now, her words measured. The Kyler were testing humanity, trying to provoke a mistake that would give them the justification they needed to destroy what they couldn't control. But Clara remained resolute. She understood now that this wasn't just about survival, it was about forging a new path, one that transcended the old ways of the galaxy. Humanity, with all its flaws, had shown the Kyler something that would alter the course of history. In the end, it was not the Kyler fleet nor their overwhelming force that would decide humanity's fate, it would be the strength of humanity's resolve. The power to choose, to forge alliances, and to lead not with force but with the power of hope. And that was something the Kyler could no longer ignore. Clara met Calethix's eyes once more, her voice steady. "We've come this far, Ambassador. Let's see where it takes us." The final day of the peace talks arrived, and with it, a heavy sense of anticipation. Clara stood at the edge of the observation deck on the neutral station, gazing at the vast stretch of space before her. It felt as though the fate of humanity and the galaxy itself rested on the outcome of this one final negotiation. After days of back and forth, of both subtle gestures and hard demands, Earth had reached the point of no return. Calethix approached her silently, his presence a comforting reminder of how far they had come since their first meeting. The cold, sterile air of the station felt distant now, replaced by something far more tangible, hope. "You look contemplative," Calethix remarked, his voice calm but laced with an underlying tension. "I am," Clara admitted, turning to him with a small smile. "This was never just about surviving, was it? We've reached this point and now we have to make sure that we don't just survive, we thrive." Calethix nodded slowly, understanding what she meant. "You're right. The true test is not just reaching the negotiation table. It is in the decisions you make now. What you offer the Kyler today could change the trajectory of the entire galaxy." "I hope they see it," Clara murmured. "That we're not just asking for survival. We're offering them the chance to build something better together. They can either choose to continue dominating or to take a different path, one that might make them stronger in ways they never imagined." Calethix studied her, his expression thoughtful. "Humanity has something the Kyler do not, an understanding that power is not just about what you take but what you build, what you offer to others." Clara sighed, rubbing her eyes. "I know it's a gamble. The Kyler are not used to cooperation. They've ruled through fear for so long, they can't imagine a world where strength comes from collaboration. But what if we're not strong enough? What if they reject our offer entirely? Then," Calethix said quietly, "you will have proven to them that humanity has a strength they could never fathom. The strength to stand in the face of impossible odds and still choose hope." The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation, and the door slid open. Clara turned to see the rest of the delegation entering, each of them taking their places around the central table, which had been set up for the final round of talks. The Kyler were already assembled on the other side, Voriel at the forefront, flanked by two of her most trusted commanders. Clara took her seat at the head of the table, Calethix beside her. The room was charged with tension, every eye fixed on the representatives. The Kyler made no effort to disguise their skepticism, their expressions hard, unyielding. They had come to test humanity to see if they could actually live up to their claims. Vuranel's gaze locked onto Clara as she spoke first, her voice steady but carrying an air of authority. We stand before you today not to beg for mercy but to offer you something we believe will change the course of this galaxy, for both of us. Humanity does not wish to fight you, but we will not be your prey. What we offer is a future of partnership, one that does not rely on domination or fear, but on cooperation. The words hung in the air and for a long moment no one spoke. The silence was a heavy thing, suffocating in its weight. The Kyler were used to watching their enemies squirm, to making them grovel for their survival. But the humans had done the opposite. They stood tall, firm in their resolve. Vuranel was the first to break the silence, her voice laced with contempt. You offer us what, exactly? Peace. What is peace to the Kyler? A fleeting illusion. You have no fleet to threaten us with. You have no weapons that can harm us. Your words are nothing but the hollow cries of a species on the brink of extinction. We have something you do not understand, Clara replied, her voice unflinching. We have a will to build, not destroy. We have a capacity for growth that no other species you've encountered can match. The Kyler may have power, but we have something far more dangerous to your way of life. A future. Vuranel's eyes flickered with irritation, but Clara continued, undeterred. We offer you an alliance, not as subordinates but as equals, co-creators of a new galaxy, one where destruction is not the only path forward. We have seen the scars left by endless conquest, the suffering it breeds. And we have chosen a different way. Galactic, who had been watching silently, spoke up, his voice calm but filled with a quiet intensity. The Kyler have always ruled through strength, through fear. But they do not know what humanity has learned, what they are capable of. The strength to rise from destruction, to rebuild, to innovate. We are not asking for mercy. We are asking for a future. Vuranel's gaze shifted between Clara and Galactic, a hint of uncertainty flickering in her otherwise stoic expression. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words faltered as if unsure of the path she should take. For a moment the room was on the edge of something monumental, something that would define the fate of the galaxy. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Vuranel spoke again, her voice far less certain. You ask for the impossible. But, she paused, eyes narrowing, calculating. Perhaps there is something to your words. Humanity does not fit the mold we have come to expect from other species. Perhaps it is time to explore a new path. The words were heavy with significance. For the first time, there was no threat in Vuranel's voice, no promise of destruction. Instead, there was a crack in the foundation of her certainty. It was not a promise of peace, but it was a sign that humanity had done the impossible. They had made the Kyler pause, reconsider, and think. Clara and Galactic exchanged a brief glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They had reached a turning point, one that would take time to unfold, but it was a beginning. Let us begin anew, Vuranel said slowly. We will explore your proposal. But know this, the Kyler will never be ruled by weakness. If you fail to deliver on your promises, there will be consequences. Clara nodded, her voice firm. We are not weak. But we are not conquerors either. We offer you a future, one where we stand together, not as rulers and slaves but as partners. As the final words of the negotiation echoed in the room, Clara realized something fundamental had shifted. The Kyler had not accepted peace, not yet, but they had acknowledged humanity's potential. The galaxy had entered a new era, one where cooperation might one day replace conquest. The first step had been taken. As the delegation parted ways, Clara looked out at the stars once more, a feeling of cautious hope filling her heart. The future was uncertain, but for the first time humanity had earned the right to shape it. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.